So what are we doing? So the first thing we did is we set up our framework. So we defined what we thought diversity was, what inclusion is. We have been very, very clear to our people that actually we want to build an inclusive culture. Diversity is a fact. Everybody's diverse. We all bring diversity. You can be a straight white guy. You are still diverse. When you look at, it depends on the measures that you're actually looking at when you're looking at trying to measure diversity. This perhaps is slightly more, but it's the people who haven't got enough time. Basically, when you talk about diversity and inclusion, sometimes it goes into that too difficult box, because actually it's something that people aren't thinking, they're not building it into their everyday practice. The first thing we've done is we've opened our HR books. Now, the bank, as I'm sure you probably would assume, is very, very data orientated. We love numbers. We love data analysis. We like to look at all the numbers. We like to look at more numbers and more numbers. So what have we done? Within HR, we've gone on a journey, and we're trying the best as we can to open our HR books, obviously within the respects of GDPR and all the data privacy, as far as we can to try and make sure that people are aware of what's going on. What we've got up here are some examples of some reporting that we put into our annual report. So every year we have targets that we put in place around diversity representation. We have our senior management targets at the top. So actually in the last year, we actually took a little bit of a step back. However, when you start looking at our representation of below senior management, we're starting to see good levels of improvement towards having a better representation. And this is the piece where our our middle managers are absolutely key. Our senior management roles, these are not going to be within the gift of our middle managers in order to be able to try and influence. So what we've really tried to do is engage our middle managers and say, look, you're the ones who are going to be looking after our more junior people within the organisation. You're the ones who are going to be responsible for every part of that career path around recruitment, around retention, around development. And actually, we need your help if we're going to be able to try and achieve our targets over the next few years. So data transparency is absolutely key. And this has led to our local inclusion plans. So basically, within each of the different respective deputy governorships within the organisation, we have an inclusion plan. So here's an example from the PRA. We now have a deputy governorship-wide plan, which is bespoke for the issues that are being raised by the PRA. And this has been developed by our local managers. Now, what's the impact of that? How have we seen the changes that are coming through the organisation? Because the numbers actually have been relatively slow in being able to see progress. We are seeing progress, but we're seeing some change, but it's happening slowly. The exception would probably be our BAME agenda, where we've seen sort of 3 or 4% increase in our representation over the last 2 or 3 years. So what we're seeing, though, is in some areas where they're really trying to they're really engaging with this, and they're really starting to see the benefit of it. We're seeing things like our BAME attrition rate was probably about 2-3 years ago, was about 15%. It was huge. It was twice as high as our non-white, as our white population. By focusing on this, using the local plans, actually getting into the local business areas, which are really trying to do that, we've seen that attrition rate drop by half. How have we done that? What are the interventions? It's about those local people on the ground starting to have career conversations with people. We've seen the benefits of reciprocal mentoring for our BAME colleagues. We've seen buddying schemes being set up. But these are our local initiatives that have really actually had an impact within those smaller local teams. And actually now we're starting to see the benefit of that feed through to the rest of the organisation. So when we are now looking at doing any form of change within HR, inclusion is part of that conversation. So we rolled out a whole new suite of management competencies that all of our managers are being assessed about. Inclusion is at the heart of it. We've looked at our training courses for new managers. We talk about inclusion. We talk about inclusive leadership. We talk about inclusive management. We talk about what that means for you. We've introduced blind CVs for all of our applications for junior roles within the organisation. But I think the key for me is the fact there is no silver bullet here. There is nothing that you can do. There's no one thing that you're going to be able to pick off the shelf and actually be able to solve all of your diversity and inclusion problems. This is about trying to work with people who understand what the problems are within the local business areas, working with them, talking to them, and trying to co-create ideas about how you can try and address them. It's not an HR thing. This has to be led and driven by the business.